This is the Danger Close podcast, Beyond the Books with me, Jack Carr. Welcome to the Danger Close podcast, an Ironclad original presented by SIG Sauer. My guest today is Sean Parnell. Sean led a platoon in Afghanistan for 16 months with the 10th Mountain Division. He chronicled that experience in a book called Outlaw Platoon. And if you don't have Outlaw Platoon, you need to get it, you need to read it, you need to gift it to friends right now. It's one of the most poignant, most emotional, and engaging memoirs of modern warfare that I have read. He also started the American Warrior Initiative and has a series of books with Eric Steele. The next one comes out on September 7th. He ran for the House of Representatives in the last election cycle for Pennsylvania's 17th Congressional District, and he is now running for Senate. You can go to parnellforsenate.com, check out what he has going on there, join Parnell's platoon, and sign up for his newsletter, make a donation, find out a little more about him there. We talk about his time in Afghanistan on this podcast, and we talk about his run for the House and his current run for the Senate and the state of the country. Sean is a patriot, a warrior, and a friend. So without further ado, Sean Parnell. So we met at Chris Kyle's funeral on the bus to that funeral. And I remember there was like a seat left next to you, and I sat down next to you, and we started talking and hit it off. And that was what an insane, time. Yeah. That was. In Texas, we were all there at the hotel. We went to the memorial at the stadium and all that sort of thing. And then I think from there, you did a Rick Stewart Patriot profile thing, which you can still, I just checked before we came on. It's still out there on YouTube. So everybody should go and check that out, because I thought that was so well done. And then you were kind enough to blurb my first novel, which was so very nice of you, that I sincerely appreciate. And you recommended that I use Jack Carr USA on the social channels before I had any sort of Instagram or Facebook. I didn't know anything about that stuff. And then, and you recommended, hey, why don't you use Jack Carr USA? And I did. And so that continues to be what I am on all the social channels. And that is all due to you.
I'm a big fan of the @USA. I'm a big fan of that. But yeah, I think that was a crazy way to meet, right? And who would have thought that, all these years later, you've done so much when you were in the military, and now writing all these incredible books, and who would have thought that just two basically nothing burger military officers coming out of the military would be where we are in life. It is kind of crazy to think that we are where we are. It's a privilege. It's a privilege, and it's a blessing, and it's a pretty damn thing. It's a pretty damn cool thing to be living in America and doing this kind of stuff.
It is. And especially for you. I was having this conversation the other day with Mike Waltz, who's in Congress. And I forget the exact date, so I'll mess it up a little bit, but I think it was late 60s, mid 70s, somewhere in there. We had the highest number of veterans ever serving in Congress. And today it's the lowest number. So I definitely want to get to all that. But before we get to all that, you may have noticed my last novel, Devil's Hand, has a president who has a background with 10th Mountain Division. So that was awesome. That was for you. So
climb to glory, Mr. President.
That's it. Love it. But I want to talk about The Road to Outlaw Platoon, this book right here. And if someone has not read this book, they should stop listening to this podcast right now and order this book, and then not just order it, but read it and then give it to friends, because it's one of the most poignant, emotional, honest memoirs of the war in Afghanistan, of modern warfare. A lot of times people are, drawn towards, hey, special operations side of the house, where we're going out at night and we're, for the most part, choosing the time and the place of the engagement. And you're out there every single day with these guys, getting after it. And I want to talk to you, the road to getting this book out there, but how many weeks was this on the New York Times bestseller
list?
My
gosh. And by the way,
something crazy.
Yeah, nobody was more surprised about that than me, but I think in its first year, it went on in its first week, and a total surprise to me, because again, I was just a nothing burger captain, right? I'd never written a book before in my life, never even walked that path at all, had no idea what was involved in promoting a book. But the fact that it hit that the list the first week. I think it stayed on like close to like 10 or 12 weeks after that. And then it went back on again around Christmas time the same year. And then again in Christmas time the next year. So I think it was on the bestseller list, like all told, I mean, over 25 weeks. I mean, I don't know for
Like, it was like 20 to 30, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Like that's amazing. And for those that know publishing, or like, that is a huge accomplishment. That is insane. That just doesn't happen very often.
Jack, it's especially hard, like when they, especially now when people talk about velocity of sales in the first week, and that helps propel things onto the list, and pre-sales as well. But then to get on a list, and I think you did this with Terminal List, but then to like have the book come out and you have that window of when you want to make the list, but then a year later, like have it make the list, like out of nowhere, that's a testament to a book that that has staying power. And, all sorts of books make the New York Times bestseller list, right? Some of them, are fantastic, legendary books that will be legendary forever. Maybe some of them not so much, but the books that have staying power are the books that like people put down and they say like, holy cow, man, like you got to read this book. Right. And that's what the Terminal List was like. And that's I think how Outlaw Platoon was like on the nonfiction side. But yeah, man, that was a crazy thing for me. I mean, it was a whirlwind for me for sure.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. And this will definitely go down and it's already gone down as one of the, and it's weird to say like, best when you're talking about a war, memoir type thing, but it'll go down as one of those that has that staying power that people reach back to, from generations ahead, go back to this account and read about your time on the ground in Afghanistan, because it's incredible. And for those that like, we only have a little bit of time on this podcast, but I encourage everybody to go to Jocko Podcast 192. And you guys spend over 5 hours talking about that experience on the ground. And it's incredible. It's honest. You're hilarious on there. I love when you talk about The Office with Jocko and how he likes the British version a lot better for some reason, which I don't understand. You're right, by the way.
Jocko and I are like it was first of all, like it just from my perspective, like I didn't know what I was getting into. Like going out there and doing that podcast, I just was excited to have the opportunity to do it. And like, I land out there and he's got this like Victory MMA gym, and I didn't know what that was like. And I like walk in there and Jocko like leads me in there. And like, if you've been in there, right? Like, like all like the octagons everywhere. And, like there's like 150 people in there rolling around and stuff. He's got his cool, sexy Jocko stuff everywhere. And I walk into there, and it's like he's like walking into the bar and cheers. Everyone's like, Jocko, hey. Like, what the hell is going on? And then he walks me upstairs, right? And again, like it's just like a frenzy all around me. Like people are like fighting and punching each other and rolling around and like all this crazy stuff. He walks into the locker room and then he goes back into this like what I think is going to be this little corner closet. I'm like, where the hell is this dude taking me? And it's like his podcast room, like back. It was like little, like 10 by 10 podcast where he launched probably one of the most successful podcasts in the entire world, from this little room, locker room broom closet,
Yeah, it's like a torture chamber. That's all the wall, it's all like the sound dampening, because right outside, people are just getting after it. So it's pretty cool. It's a cool experience to be in there and do that. But so I'm going to take people through a little bit about what like your journey to where you are now running for Senate. When it's Sean Parnell for Senate, I think .com for Congress.com.
Now it's ParnellForSenate.com, but yeah.
ParnellForSenate.com. So you got this crazy journey from, let's say, the morning of 9/11 up to now. So where are you the morning of 9/11, and then how does that impact your life? What is that decision when you're like, I'm going to stand up here and I'm going to go defend the country?
Yeah, man. I 9/11, I think, changed my life, and I think it galvanized an entire generation, our generation, Jack. And I was just a college kid. I was an elementary education major trying to wrap my mind around how I was going to student teach second grade, and
wow.
And the thing is it like, I didn't come from like a long line of military generals. Like, I knew of the military, but it wasn't something that I was like laser focused on doing. I'm a city boy, born in the city of Pittsburgh. And then 9/11 happened, and I remember waking up one morning with this terrible hangover. I mean, me and my college buddies had this party the night before, and I was always sort of like a listless kid. I never really wanted to know. I never knew what I wanted to do with my life, and I knew that like being an elementary school teacher would be great and probably be fulfilling, but I wasn't exactly like sure in my heart of hearts that was what I was meant to do. And then like just that one morning, wake up in this rundown college apartment, surrounded by these beer cans, turn on the television set, just in time to see an airplane crash into the World Trade Center. And in that moment, my life was really changed forever. And I just, I just believed in my heart of hearts in that moment, in the wake of that horrific terrorist attack, man, that I knew exactly why God had put me on this earth. And that was to, get in the fight and serve my country and be a part of America's collective response, and I wanted to do all the cool, sexy stuff, go into the infantry to be on the front lines, and then go to airborne school and go to Ranger school. And like really the catchphrase of the Army, like it was a little bit before 9/11, but the whole be all that you can be, That's what I wanted to do, and I didn't know how I was going to get it done because I've never been the sort of biggest, fastest, strongest, or smartest guy. I just knew that was my path, and come hell or high water, I was going to walk it and accomplish that mission and take the fight to the enemy. And eventually at that point, a couple of years later, I had to transfer schools. I was up at a school in Western Pennsylvania called Clarion University. I transferred to Duquesne University because Clarion at the time didn't have an ROTC program. And I'm like, well, if I'm going to get in the fight, I've got to actually have a program to support it. I transferred to Duquesne, graduated a couple years later, and was in the Army, training to go to Afghanistan. And in 2006, I got my opportunity to do that. And man, it's like when I learned the life lesson of be careful what you wish for, because like I wanted to do all that cool, sexy stuff. And I did. I made it through airborne school, went to Ranger school. When the Army sent me to a couple of cool, sexy schools, I was assigned to a light infantry platoon in the 10th Mountain Division. And I got to Fort Drum, New York in 2005. And back then, like, we knew that we were going to Afghanistan, but intelligence from where we were going was really scarce. In fact, a lot of the guys in my unit, Jack, like we just thought that it was going to be a stability and support operation, that the lion's share of this country were focused on the Iraq war. And this was at a time where people talked about the surge, right? This is a critical point where George W. Bush was talking about sending more troops there. And the debate over weapons of mass destruction and whether or not we should even be there. But Afghanistan, we just felt like, well, hey, we're just going there. A lot of my NCOs had already been there a couple times, and they're like, we didn't see anything.
Oh, wow.
So we didn't know what the hell we were getting ourselves into, man. And I feel like when we finally got there, we were thrown into the meat grinder, and it was like drinking from a fire hose. The enemy that we faced there was just relentless every day. I mean, it was just unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, describe it in Outlaw Platoon, and it's insane to think you went from, I mean, you had some training. I mean, you went to those schools, boom.
Yeah.
And then you're and you fought to get infantry, I think. And then bam, you're out there, and you get there a little bit before your guys. It's just like, officers, we usually get there a little bit 2 weeks ahead of time, a week ahead of time. Some of the leadership from the platoon gets there to get things set up and then receive the rest of the platoon. But so you get there, and your first day in Afghanistan is one that it's, I mean, I know you won't forget it, but nobody who reads this book will forget it either. Can you describe that a little? I mean, you are thrown into the meat grinder, and it didn't start. It wasn't like, we're going to get you up to speed here, take a couple weeks. You're in there day one.
Yeah. And you know how that is. And again, like, it's like, I had some training, but, as an infantry officer, I mean, most of the jobs that my guys had prior to carrying a machine gun in the mountains of Afghanistan was high school shortstop, so these guys aren't, they're high speed, low drag people, like they're tough as nails, but these guys aren't like Green Berets, Special Forces, Navy SEALs type guys. These are just kids, and we get to Afghanistan, and I mean, we land our CH-47, our Chinook helicopter. We land under fire, which is commonplace. I didn't know it at the time, but it's pretty commonplace for our base. But we get off there, and like it hits the fan. Everybody runs like 20 different ways. And it just seemed like I'd never been in a moment like that. And there's so many things going through your mind, but like that first moment where someone's like, where you realize is like, oh my God, like somebody out there that I don't know is trying to kill me for reasons that they don't even know me either. You know what I mean? I remember thinking like, that is it's a really surreal thing. Like these people want me dead. Like, and this is real. And we get to the base and of course we run from the helicopter landing zone, helicopter takes off. We all run for our base. And I mean, I had my NCOs who had already been in Afghanistan before, like knew exactly how to react in moments like that. And whether guys were running to the aid station or to the tactical operations center to help, like everybody seemed like they had a job, but I didn't really know what the hell to do. And I remember desperately looking for a way to help or to be helpful. But it ended up being some young private saying like, hey, sir, if you're not doing anything, like we need an all hands on deck situation. Like we need all the help we can get at the front gate. And I'm like, of course. And I run down there and all these rockets that have been fired at us, the enemy didn't really let up on those on the firing for a second. We get down to the front gate and I don't know what to expect, but we show up there and like our base was separated from the rest of Afghanistan, Jack, by like these like wrought iron bars that you would see in like an American gated community or something. And we get there and like, you've got our interpreter arguing with, American soldiers and Afghan families. It's just chaos. And as I took a closer look through those bars, I realized like it was like 20 Afghan families carrying broken, bloody bodies of their little kids. And these rockets that the enemy had fired at us there were 107 millimeter rockets that had overshot our base and overshot the bird, but landed in this like little Kalat compound school playground and wounded and hurt a bunch of young Afghan kids. And man, that was like, you talk about culture shock and you talk about like, it's setting in real quickly, reality setting in real quickly that combat is real and it spares no one. And oftentimes kids are the ones that are caught in the middle of it, and boy, is that horrible. And so I just tried to help as best I could, grabbed a little girl and along with a bunch of other soldiers at the front gate that day and tried to run her to our aid station where a bunch of our medics and our company doc was there trying to help administer first aid. And, ended up getting this little girl to the aid station a little bit too late and she died before I could even get her there. And on my first day in Afghanistan, I just remember like, like you walk into an aid station like that, Jack, and it's like soldiers and you've been in situations like this. I say soldiers because I was in the Army, but they're like unbelievable. They're remarkable. Like when traumatic moments happen, it's like you walk in there, there's like 10 of these tables that are like stainless steel tables, right? And they're like, everyone is laser focused on trying to save these kids' lives. And so when we all realized that the little one that I was carrying hadn't made it, it was just like I had to scoop her up off the table, make room for the next little kid, and I just walked her out to her father. And my first day in Afghanistan, as a really young college kid, the combat leader, like first day in Afghanistan, I'm walking the dead body of a little girl back to her father, who her father just like looked at me and like just stoically nodded his head like, hey, thank you for trying. And then he turned around and walked away. And that really stuck with me for a lot of reasons, that moment, obviously, because it was so traumatic. But that in a nutshell is what Afghanistan is like. And I personally believe that like that moment was when I really felt a shift inside of my heart of, you're really changing from an insulated American citizen to warrior or somebody that can experience moments like that one and endure, not necessarily have all the existential answers that come with that, right? Like how do you wrap your mind around that? You don't, but you learn to like lock it away, compartmentalize, say whatever you want, but just focus on the mission. And what I couldn't get off of my mind, Jack, was like, how am I supposed to lead these men, right? How am I supposed to lead these men and experience moments like that and endure, But you just figure it out because you have to. But
you have to.
But that stuff changes you, man,
It does. And like thinking back on it, like the kids that's the part when I look back, like the parts that stay with you are like the kids crying and, on target or whatever, and when you talk about it in your book too, like giving candy, like we want to do that as Americans, we want to give candy. We did that too. And, when I'm there in 2003, we have candies and all that stuff. And then you see, like you had that very similar experience. You see the boys come out, you give them to the girls, and then girls get beat up for the candy. And then you're like, geez. And for you, the end of that chapter, I mean, it is so emotional. Like it's a very emotional read. So when you take that uniform that's covered in blood and you walk down to a burn pit and you burn your uniform, first day in Afghanistan, like that was just so telling and so powerful. I mean, it's insane. And then you get to go. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, and I remember, man, like. Yes, it was. And I remember like right after I burned that uniform, like, and I don't remember if I talk about this. I think I do talk about this in the book. Boy, it's been a long time since I flipped through it. But like, we were having spaghetti at the DFAC that night. And like to this day, like red spaghetti sauce, like after, you know what I mean? Like little things like that. That's just like, it's just like, that's what I think about. Like when I think about that day, and I just remember like, I couldn't eat, but it's just like the red spaghetti sauce is what sticks in my mind that day. It's
amazing how that stuff happens when you associate something with a traumatic event and it stays with you the rest of your life. And, so powerful. Then you get tested under fire, where you have a chance to not just be on the receiving end, but to bring it. And you do. Like this is your first test now as a combat leader when everyone's looking at you to make a decision on May 7th. And that's really the first time, I think, where you can maneuver forces and go get after it. And that's you roll into an ambush essentially on that day. Is that right?
Yeah. Oh man. And the enemy had us down and out. Yeah. It was May 7th, 2006, the first day that I had gotten shot at. And we drove around like this big hill. It was called Hilltop 2474. It was what it was named on the map. It was a hilltop called Gangakel Hill. And so we roll around this hilltop that was just a sheer cliff face up to the left outside the driver's side door. And to the right was just this sheer cliff down. So there was nowhere for us to go. So we come around this turn, perilously balanced on this road. And it was like we drove down into like a gravy boat. And at the bottom of that gravy boat, before we could drive out the other side, we got ambushed from both sides of the hill. So from machine gun positions on the top of the hill and like down across this wadi system and up on the top of another hill, they just start pounding us from both sides. And I had 5 gun trucks with me, and I had probably another 5 gun trucks. They were Afghan Toyota Hiluxes that were leading. But they stopped, right? They stopped right in front of us. And as soon as we got attacked, it was like somebody hit, like a wasp's nest or something with a baseball bat, and they just scatter. And so, but those 5 trucks were basically like roadblocks for us, right? And because we turned around about a 90-degree bend to get down into that gravy boat, so we couldn't drive through the ambush, we couldn't back out of the ambush. We were just getting pounded, man, just absolutely pounded from either side. And, with sniper fire, volley fire, rocket propelled grenades, machine guns, and, we were down and we were out, man. Like there was not like we couldn't drive forward, couldn't assault through an ambush because how are you going to do it? There's a cliff face on one side and a cliff drop off on the other. No way out of this situation. And that's really like when I thought like, holy cow, man, like we are not facing, farmers with pitchforks or some ragtag insurgency here. Like these are these fighters that we were facing in Afghanistan had, cut their teeth or fought against the Russians in the 80s and then in the Afghan Civil War in the 90s and then against us after a post 9/11 era in that country. Like they were really good and they ambushed us at a perfect point. And so I just remember thinking like, got to do something that's not taught in the field manuals, and that's why I always tell young soldiers or when I go talk at West Point or whatever, like the field manual is just a guide, right? You have to know these battle drills and internalize them and train on them. They should be second nature to you, but they're just a guide, right? A framework. You got to train yourself to think outside the box because a lot of officers in the Army and the infantry, I think, especially young ones, have trouble thinking outside the box. Now, special operators like yourselves, that's what you do. You think outside of the box. But in the Marines or in the Army, everything has a regulation and a structure and a chain of command. And so in that moment, you know, the TTPs or the tactics, techniques, and procedures that you would use of react to a near ambush is, hey, this is going to really suck, but assault through the ambush, right? We couldn't do that. We couldn't do that. So I had to think outside of the box. And after taking fire for about a minute, got out of the truck and just did my best to rally the troops. Instead of assaulting through the ambush, my intent was to run up to the top of the hill, try to get my men to run with me, and have the Afghan National Army try to get them consolidated, organized, so that we could push through the kill zone and actually take the high ground and fight back. And Jack, like when I got out of that truck, man, it was like, my first thought was like, it wasn't like some heroic thing, man. It was like, I immediately regret this decision. Like, this is really stupid. What am I doing? And like, it was like, I mean, like, it was
should have been a teacher.
Yeah. It was like the moment just like stuck in the middle of a kill zone. The moment just like kaleidoscopes around you. Right. And it's like, there's so much going on. Like you can't process it, you know? So I just ran my ass off and tried to get to the lead truck and pounded on the door in the truck, hoping that my second squad leader, a guy named Phil Baldwin, he was just a stud. I just looked at him and gave him the old like rally, and I just kept running. Didn't say anything, and I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even tell him to follow me or anything like that. Like this isn't going as planned. I don't know if they're going to follow me. And I get halfway up the hill, and like clearly the enemy is like training in on me and shooting at me. And like, I could hear over all of this chaos, like these single shots and it was from this Dragunov sniper rifle that we learned after the fact that a sniper on the ground was just trying to shoot me. Thank God he wasn't that good of a shot. But I'm thinking like, so we're at 15,000 feet, you know, and my lungs are on fire. I'm carrying 90 pounds of gear. Like my legs are like filled with lead. I'm like, holy shit, I'm going to die out here. Like, I'm not even going to be able to make it. I'm going to fall out before I make it to the top of the damn hill. This is like the least inspirational thing ever. And I turn around in that moment, like see like all of my men were following me. And I was like, that was like taking a shot of adrenaline, you know, and that was like what powered me through. And we get to the top of the hill. We were able to, you know, long story short, like get the ANA back to the trucks and organize a counterattack. And I think we ended up killing, you know, between 8 and 12 enemy troops that day. But we learned a lot about how they fought. And boy, that was sort of foreshadowing, I guess, for what we had in store for us that deployment, because it was a back and forth chess match, you know, like they'd hit us and we'd learn, we'd adapt, and then they hit us again. We'd learn, we'd adapt. And after 16 months of that, we got pretty darn good at it. And I think we killed so many of them that we knew the terrain in Afghanistan better than they did, which was really interesting. But yeah, that was one hell of a, and I remember coming back to the chow hall after that. And like, I'm like thinking like, oh God, you never know how you do, man. Like, you know, like I knew that like we had taken the high ground, fought back, killed a bunch of them. But you know, you just never, you don't know. You just, maybe it was successful, maybe it wasn't. I didn't know how my NCOs were going to react. And I mean, they're a real like barometer check, like, you know, and I walk into the chow hall and Sergeant Sabaki, who is like this, like tough as nails guy, had been in combat before like several times, my weapons squad leader, he ends up like coming in and like slapping me on the shoulder and like, you know, this habit of like shaking the shit out of you. Like, and he's like, and I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm like, if your podcast like does a swearing thing, but sometimes it just slips out.
Do it.
And he like just shakes me and he goes, great job, sir. And then all my NCOs like stood up and started clapping and stuff. And I was like,
so wild.
This is like, you know what this is like? This is like the military version of like Rudy, you know, the team like picks him up on the back of the shoulders and like slow clap.
Yeah.
And like that was
so fantastic.
That was a pretty damn cool moment for me. And
yeah.
And it was at that moment, Jack, that I realized that like we all volunteer to serve this country for a litany of different reasons. But at the end of the day, like, being in combat is about not letting down your brothers or your sisters in arms, right? And I knew that it didn't matter how bad things got or what the enemy threw at us, that I was going to do everything that I could not to let those men down. And yeah, it's like that Band of Brothers line, like, we stand alone together, and that's just sort of what it feels like out there. And come hell or high water, I wasn't going to let those guys down.
And you should have been killed like 100, 150, 200 times. Like,
I know.
And people might have missed it, but you said 16 months. And I want to get to that a little bit later, because that's a tad bit longer than you expected and a normal Army deployment. But there's an amazing moment that I want to talk about when you learned about staying a little bit longer. By a little bit, I mean a lot longer. I mean, you're adapting to the enemy's adapting to you, constant game of adaptation. And you did that on that first ambush, that first engagement, that May 7th engagement. That was obviously very impactful to you, to the guys. Just incredible. Love the slow clap.
And Jack, like again, I want to reiterate, like, I'm not like a special operator or a guy, right? Like, I was born in the city of Pittsburgh. So like, I had guys in my platoon that like were from the South and had been hunting their whole lives. And like, it's like they were born to be in the military. So this was like a big deal to me, like of being successful on the battlefield. And it was funny, like Jocko, like we talked about the Jocko podcast, and Jocko just looks like he was made for the fight.
Right.
And I remember like having a conversation with him or something offline about his hair, and he's like, I shave my hair because I don't need hair. And I said, yeah, but when you get on the objective, you got to look fabulous, man, And like, that's the difference, right? Like, you guys are bred and born for the fight. I feel like I was just a guy that joined the military after 9/11, wanted to do his part, and didn't really, like I said, it wasn't always like the biggest, strongest, fastest, but it was the reality is great people, great troops inspire their leaders. And that's what drove me to keep fighting harder than I really ever thought possible.
Yeah, I mean, you stepped it up. That's what's great about America. We come together and stand up, and just like you, thought you were a teacher one day. September 11th happened. Next thing, you're going to be in the military, and not just something in the military. You're going to be infantry, and you're going to get out there on the front lines. Incredible. And then early on, you have an experience with interpreters, and of course, they're a critical part of dealing with the local populace overseas. And for me, the units I was with, we had vetting process. We had, they're getting, in some cases, even polyed. We fly people over from the United States. They poly these people in certain instances with certain covert action programs and things like that. They had to get TSSCI cleared to be in our talk, to do these different things. So I always felt very comfortable with our interpreters. You had to hire from essentially the local economy. And do your own, and maybe as a turnover from the units before, that sort of thing. But the vetting process was, I think, a lot of kind of gut feel. You're in an interview type deal. So, and your first one was in there. I mean, he has an amazing backstory. His father, I think, was killed, and he's in there for a reason. He has a why he's doing what he's doing. And then he gets killed. You find him dead alongside the road for essentially helping out the Americans. And now we have that, of course, we're thinking about that as we get ready to leave Afghanistan. And we're thinking of all these people who helped us over there and what their fate is going to be. And probably what's happening to them right now as we're talking, as we're waiting to figure out this visa issue program and get them to the United States, maybe. But I think there's something like 18,000 different people, and that's probably on the low end. Because there's various ways that the enemy would look at how you help Americans, maybe by not saying something or by actually helping, maybe by cleaning there's so many facets, but the interpreters in particular, I think are at the top of those target lists. So, but you had one get killed early on. And I think that made an impact on you going forward, but he was killed for helping you guys out.
Abdul was his name. And that really affected me deeply, because Abdul had joined or came to help us and fight for his country's freedom, because the Taliban had assassinated his father. His father was fighting against them, trying to fight for a free Afghanistan. And Abdul sort of felt like it was his responsibility to help us help the country. And this guy was like a hard charger. He really believed in the mission, and he was like our head interpreter. And you're right, like back then we didn't have a real vetting process. The interpreters that we used were the ones passed down to us from the special forces teams, from the Green Berets teams who came in after Operation Anaconda and stuff like that. They were hired by SF, and they were passed down to, like, I think the 173rd Airborne, and then to the 10th Mountain to us after that. And so Abdul was one of the first interpreters in that country that had worked with special forces teams. And man, he was just great. And one day, his family had gotten some night letters, and he wanted to go and help his family. And there was some drama on our base. Our commander didn't want to let him go. And I understand that. Like, we had a mission, and he was needed for that mission the next day. But at the same time, his family was only 45 minutes south. And like, we've got to do everything we can to protect our interpreters and their families while we're there as well. So long story short is Abdul left the base in the middle of the night, went to go check on his family, and was ambushed at some point as he left the base before he reached his house. And we found him dead on the side of the road. And that affected me. That affected me a lot. And we had an interpreter step up and fill the void of head interpreter. His name is Yusef. And again, this is another guy that had been working with the Americans since the invasion of Afghanistan just after September 11th. And so his name was Yusef. But there was always something that sort of like bothered me. I don't know, maybe bothered us too. There's something like in here that just didn't feel quite right. And I just chalked it up to, hey, there's a cultural divide, and there is. And so he filled the role of head interpreter. And Jack, here's because this was so early and there wasn't really Task Force Titan, I think, stood up later, which was help. They had a system and a process for vetting interpreters. We didn't really have any of that. But even the interpreters that we got later that came from Task Force Titan that were fully vetted, they got to our region in Afghanistan and they couldn't speak Waziri, and that was a real problem because there was a regional dialect in our area that was just distinct from anything else in Afghanistan. And so that's why guys like Abdul and Yusuf and Shah were so valuable to us. And so we couldn't get another interpreter is what I'm saying. It's not like, oh, I don't like this guy, I'm going to find somebody else. No, you got what you got. And
there's nobody else.
Yeah, there's nobody else. And so he ended up stepping up and filling that role, and then ended up getting some guys hurt and killed later on in the deployment, unfortunately.
And that part is crazy because I think a lot of people don't really think about Iranian involvement. We think of Iraq typically. We think of rat lines. We think of EFPs coming across to influence us in Iraq so that they can, so that Iranian influence can then essentially take over, do what they couldn't do in 8 years of the Iran-Iraq war. But you don't typically hear too much about it in Afghanistan unless you're there and you're studying it and you're really, really involved. But this guy is making sat phone calls to someone in Iran. And some national level intelligence sources figure this out and eventually get in touch with you guys. And then he gets arrested. And, but the Iranian involvement piece in two places in particular, I think you talk about it in Outlaw Platoon, a bomb making cell over the border in Pakistan, but facilitated by Iran. I mean, it's amazing how all these things work. But when that Terp did eventually get arrested, what happened to him long term?
So what? Yeah, you're right. You described that perfectly. And this is something that, as a leader, I regret profoundly, and not putting a stop to this sooner. Is that we had sat phones on the base, and our interpreters wanted to call their families every now and again. And we had this policy where we didn't really want them in our MWR, our morale, welfare, and recreational. That's the only way that they had to contact their family. And, we were sort of new to Afghanistan, and everyone wanted to have a good relationship with the interpreters and all this. But my NCOs had told me time and time again, hey, sir, we should really be careful about giving a sat phone to an interpreter that's unsupervised, or be careful about giving op orders in front of interpreters, or letting an interpreter ride in the command truck where they can hear all the radio signals or know exactly where we're going. And all the while, I knew that was the right answer. And I knew that I should have done something. But as a leader, it was just one of those things yeah, I'll get to it. I'll get to it. There are more pressing things. And come to find out that Yusuf was not using the sat phones, at least later in the deployment, he wasn't using the sat phones to call his family. He was using the sat phones to communicate with an Iranian IED making cell in Pakistan. And again, as you mentioned, it ended up being some national level asset that had heard him talking, on this cell phone in Eastern Afghanistan, and ended up. I went on leave, and Yusuf ended up communicating with this Iranian IED cell about the location of one of our observation posts and where we were going to set up. And waiting for my platoon on that hill was a plastic Italian TC6 anti-tank mine. More metal in a pack of cigarettes than something like that. And so my truck rolls over this. I wasn't there because I was on leave, but my truck rolls over this mine, and this mine completely destroys my truck, wounds everybody in it, and kills my forward observer, a kid that I really liked and loved, actually. And that was because I feel like I didn't do my job as a leader and sort of like listening to my NCOs really. And then this, it's a leadership lesson, and if there's something that your people all around you are telling you need to act on and is urgent, and it's urgent, but maybe you're just a little too lazy to do it or didn't want to be the bad guy. Well, it doesn't matter. Sometimes good leadership means that you're not making friends all the time, So Yusuf gets arrested. Well, what happened was, Jack, is that like we knew that it was Yusuf, and I ended up coming back from leave, and we had to wait to arrest him at the right time. Like we were going to do a patrol up to our battalion base up in Oregon E, and we were going to arrest him there because we had MPs there that could help facilitate that transfer the right way. But so in the meantime, we just had to like pretend like everything was cool with Yusuf. And so I get back in the base and I'm like seething. I find out that he had turned on us, stabbed us in the back. And like, I'm sitting down in the chow hall and like, he sits down like right next to me and like, hey, Commander Sean, like, like just like that used car salesman type, demeanor. And I'm just like thinking like, man, I just want to kill this guy right here and right now, but couldn't. But we end up doing a patrol, going up to Oregon E a couple days later, and he ends up getting arrested. And believe it or not, maybe you probably do believe this, but there was some snafu in the way that his paperwork was processed, and ended up letting him go, even though we had definitive proof that he was working with Iranian IED cells in Pakistan to conduct attacks or terrorist attacks on Americans in Afghanistan. He ended up letting him go. And
no way.
Yeah, that just sucks, man. But I think it just speaks to how difficult the fight is over there on so many different, like in many ways, you're up against your own bureaucracy, up against the complex operating environment that is Afghanistan. Like you're facing, like we were fighting Hekmatyar, Haqqani Network, the Taliban, Al Qaeda. We're trying to distinguish between all of that and like just criminal activity. It's just like,
it's insane. And you're just thrown in there, like you said. I mean, you're fresh out of college. You've been to Ranger School and Airborne School. You're all the guys with you have been, they're playing video games or playing high school baseball, a little bit before that. And then here you are thrown into this incredibly complex situation for which there are really no good answers.
And exactly.
In the case of interpreters, they become, part of your platoon, they become a part of the team. So I totally, see how that situation, how that came about, because they become part of your team. They're fighting next. Your life depends on them in many cases. So it's just crazy. But there's an interesting thing you said about going on leave. So people that might not know that you're forced to in the Army. And, for me, that sounds awful because you're in it and then you're forced to go for 2 weeks, get a taste of back home, and then get thrown right back. It's like Hell Week leaving, they let you sleep for 2 hours or 10 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever it is. And then you're right back in the surf zone again. But they let you taste it for a second, which is so much worse. That's when you get the most quitters in Hell Week, is when you go back in that surf zone after they let you sleep for an hour or so. But I mean, so they make you go on leave for 2 weeks. And what's interesting when you talk about you're fighting a bureaucracy, there's a couple moments in the book that really highlighted this to me. And one was when you step off that plane in Bagram, getting ready to go home, you're covered in blood and dirt and sweat and grime. You got your magazine in your weapon. And of course, out walks the guy in his perfectly clean uniform that's pressed right there on base for him and has the perfect haircut and comes on out and immediately beelines to you to give you a hard time. Like, that's why it's so easy in my novels to make bad guys out of those people, because they exist. These fobbits, they're there and you just want to smack them. And so for me, I channel all that rage and then it comes out in my novels in a fictional sense. And then the other one, which is so outrageous, is the dog situation.
Oh my God.
And for those who have been downrange, been to Iraq, Afghanistan, Philippines, whatever, you get these dogs that are strays essentially, and they become part of your platoon and they get names like, I think we had J-Dam, I think was the one in Afghanistan. You have Trigger, J-Dam, they always have some sort of a name. It seemed like that. And you guys had these dogs that were part of your platoon. And of course you mentioned General Order Number 1, which for those listening is like a catch-all to give senior level leadership any reason whatsoever to get you. But I think it singles out like no alcohol, no gambling, no porn. Although they don't really focus on the gambling or the porn, they seem more focused on the alcohol. I think like good order and discipline type stuff. But you have one of your dogs like barks at some, from another base.
Yes, yeah, and it's funny. Like I get attacked for this, like, and I have been attacked by this, like in the political side, which is a totally different thing. But like, yeah, somebody like a male clerk had, they take these ring routes, right? Like
I remember the ring routes.
Yeah, so like a helicopter will fly from Bagram, then to Salerno, then to Organy, then to Parnell, and then back to Bagram. They call those ring routes, right? And so, they'll send mail clerks out on these ring routes to deliver your mail. And one of our dogs had barked at a mail clerk, and we were supposed to go out on a mission, and we knew that there was some drama there, but it never dawned on us that anything would really come of it. And yeah, we had all these dogs, right? And the dogs were important to us for a lot of reasons, because they were like our tether to like what a normal life at home was like.
You're tethered to humanity in many senses.
Yes.
Like it's
like in a world where you are surrounded by the enemy, even the Afghan National Army that you're working with that are supposed to be your friends, like maybe they are and maybe they aren't. Like maybe one day they turn their AK-47 on you while you're walking and patrolling and they shoot you. You just never know. You're just surrounded by potential enemies all day, every day. But these dogs, like they're always there for you.
That's it.
And it just we had a dog, it was called Trigger, and we had a bunch of dogs. It's like you said, and it was just amazing, man. And we came back from patrol one day and found out that, a medic had been sent down from our battalion base and had killed all of our dogs and threw their bodies in the freaking burn pit, man. And that just, to this day, it just makes me seethe with anger. Like it just, So this is what I mean by what the bureaucracy and fighting the bureaucracy is like, I understand why it exists. I understand General Order Number 1, but like, and I understand like the whole thing with dogs, right? Like we can't like give them the vaccines that they need, or so maybe they can be rabid and bite somebody. I get all that, but like these dogs like had been vaccinated or medics were working on them. They were part of our family, and like, nope. General Order Number 1 says no dogs, so we're going to kill them and throw their bodies in the burn pit. Insane. It's
so infuriating. Like that chapter made me just seethe as well, because it's indicative of so many other things that happen in a gigantic bureaucracy, I guess. But in particular, it's particularly infuriating when you're out there doing the nation's work, going out every day, thrown into these situations like we talked about, for which there are no good answers. Yeah. You're adapting on the fly. You're doing the best you can. You're covered in blood. You're losing guys, and then they kill your dogs. Like, that makes me so angry.
It's like, I swear to God, like it doesn't matter what generation you serve or what war you fought in. Like every veteran, every combat veteran, I feel like has stories like that, where like because of the bureaucracy, confounding decisions are made that profoundly affect the morale of the troops. And any civilian that reads this stuff is like, what the hell? But it just never like every every generation, like it always happens. Like stuff like this always happens in the military.
Yeah. Infuriating. We had vets, and we had some dogs that we really liked, and I think enough time has passed now, but we would smuggle them back to the United States as our working dogs. Because in the beginning, you could do that. You know, you just like label the crate, you know, fill out a little paperwork, sign something, check a box, and all of a sudden, it's now a military working dog. And so we got a lot of them back.
This is the difference between the special operations world and my world. Like you guys had you guys had more flexibility. I feel like with stuff like this, like we were just it's
a bending of the rule, you know, to the breaking point, you know. But hey, I mean, it's the right thing to do.
It's the right thing to do.
Those guys.
It's the right thing to do. Yeah, it is. It is. And yeah, but it's, you know, that's why I talk to people like when combat it's just like getting kicked in the crotch every single day. Every single day. It's not.
Well, especially for you guys. I mean, it's like, you know, we had, you know, we were in some outstations, and especially in Afghanistan, you know, in Iraq, there's some more, most of the time anyway, there's a little more, because you're just so close, you're closer to things, you're closer to airfields, it's not as far to get you your gym stuff and, you know, food and all that stuff. But where you are, you're out there in Afghanistan, you are hanging it out there every single day. And you're on your own. In many cases, so you're just making do with what you have. You're adapting. You're figuring it out on the fly. And there's one chapter in particular. I know I got to let you go here pretty soon, but one chapter that everyone needs to read when they're making decisions or voting for people who are going to be making decisions on national security issues, on Afghanistan or Iraq, whatever it might be, is that Village of the Damned chapter. Oh my! I mean, we all know that stuff happens. Not just in Afghanistan, it happens other places, you know, around the world as well, where life is just not as, it's so weird to say, you know, it's not as precious to some people.
That's right. That's exactly what it's like, Jack. I mean, you know what this is like.
Can you describe what happened there? Because it is, people just don't know. They might, you know, have heard something or like read something here or there, or maybe think that things like this happen, but no, it's like not uncommon in most of the world for these things to happen. And you saw it firsthand, and it's just, and
it's just, that was just one instance of many. And like, you know, there was a remote village whose village elder had been accused by the Taliban of helping Americans. And by the way, like there were village elders out there that helped us. He wasn't one of them. And as payback for that, or as retribution for helping us, they captured his grandson and they tortured him. And they tortured him in some of the most horrific ways possible, just to send a message like, this is what happens if you help the Americans. And
this is a 6-year-old kid.
6-year-old kid. Yep. And we ended up finding this kid wandering in the middle of the road, and the Taliban had just abandoned him there. And we brought him back to the village elder. And he was, just remember, he was so grateful that we had saved his grandson. And it was that moment that saved us months later, where
comes through with information.
Yeah. He had helped us. He had helped us by letting our command know that the enemy was moving in huge numbers to attack us, right? But it was that act of kindness in the middle of combat that I think saved all of us. But I mean, Jack, this was like one instance. Like there was another time of a guy who actually was helping us, like in vicinity of the border, helping us stop cross-border or border crossings of Al-Qaeda insurgents. And the Taliban had somehow found out that he was helping, or Al-Qaeda had somehow found out that he was helping. And one day they like snuck up to his house in the middle of the night, threw a grenade in the crib of where his newborn baby was sleeping, and killed the baby. Like that's just, and we ended up rolling up on that scenario like the day after. And he was just like, yeah, they found out and they killed it's matter of factly. That's the thing. Like stuff like this is just the norm over there. Like, yeah, they killed my newborn baby, you know, like it's just horrific stuff. And
with that 6-year-old, you find him, he's essentially getting eaten alive by these bugs. His eyes have been burned out. He can't cry because his tear ducts are burnt out. They've been raping him for weeks, knocked out his teeth. Like it is absolutely horrific. And it just makes
That's what they do. And we, you know, up until that point, Jack, like you've heard of like the Chai Boys in Afghanistan and like the whole the whole Man Love Thursday. Well, that's just like part of, they have these, they take these little boys, and these little boys become their little like T boys, and they just shadow around these village elders everywhere. It's just the way that children are treated in that country is just horrific, man. And there's almost no value placed on human life by those in power and the enemy that we face in Afghanistan at all.
And there's something, so having just talked about those stories, and I'm going to jump ahead here, it just makes it makes me have even more respect for you. And for the people that read this book, they'll get that same sense. And then after seeing things like that, and then you're in a position where you're in this other firefight, and there's guys in these trees and above you, and a guy gets shot out of a tree, and he lands essentially at your feet by the front right tire of your vehicle. Yeah. And your turret gunner comes out with the Mossberg with a shotgun, and it's going to finish him off. And you're like, no, we're Americans. That's not what we do. And like that is why we have to maintain that moral high ground.
We do.
And no matter what we do. That's the only thing in many cases that differentiates us from the enemy. We take care of these kids. Once we have you, you're a prisoner of ours. Okay, now it's our job to protect you with our lives, essentially. And you do that in a situation where it would have been so easy just to either just not even look the other way, but to keep, just to not hone in and say no. And you do it to save that turret gunner from a lifetime of regret and second thoughts. And anyway, that's such an amazing chapter. Really hit home with me.
Man. Like, I mean, like, I also think it's a leader's responsibility to help be that moral compass. Like when you're again, like when I say that you're surrounded by death and destruction every day, like it's not hyperbole, you are. And it's real easy to lose yourself in a situation like that, lose your humanity in a situation like that when there's very little oversight. In fact, the only oversight is you as a commander, as a leader. And so in that moment, it wasn't, I have to say, like, of course, like we're Americans, we hold ourselves to a higher standard. And that is all that weighed heavily on why I made that call. But also I didn't want that piece of human garbage who preys upon little children and preys upon the people of Afghanistan to weigh on the conscience of one of my troops for the rest of his life, which he undoubtedly would have. He was that person, that horrible insurgent or terrorist wasn't worth it.
No, that's amazing. I mean, that says a lot about you. It says a lot about your character, especially moving forward into the realm you're now in politics. But before we get there, and I know I got to let you go, your kids are coming. I said I was going to talk about one thing, which was getting.
We can go. Like we could have another conversation later. We can go a little bit long. Whatever you want, man. Whatever you want.
Okay. Maybe a little bit longer just to get to the politics and what you're doing now, because I think it's so. It's so incredible what you're doing. But right here, you think you're going home. And, this didn't just happen to you guys. This happened to other people. It happened in Iraq. I think when I was there in 2004, I want to say, guys are at the airport. Some people are home already, waiting to receive people and material coming back. And then you get this word and you get woken up, I think. You're brought into like the Tactical Operations Center and your captain dies there. And he says, man, I'm going to read you a quote from former Marine Corps Commandant General Charles C. Krulak. When the hard times come, and they will, people will cling to leaders they know and trust, to those who are not detached but involved, and to those who have consciences. They will seek out leaders who stand for something bigger than themselves and who have the moral courage and strength of character to do what they know in their hearts to be the right thing. And you're like, what on earth is he talking about? Like, we're about to leave. Is this, is this way to say goodbye? And then he says, man, we have been extended for 120 days.
Yeah, man, I know. That's exactly where we were there. Like, hey, where's he going with this?
Yeah, 120. That's not like a week or two, and which is devastating enough.
Look, man, we went through a year of absolute hell. We got shot at every day. Like my base took over 4,000 indirect fire attacks, 107mm rockets, mortars, whatever, what have you. Like sometimes you'd get hit with a rocket attack and they were really accurate. And by the way, we got hit with 122s as well, which are like a 6-foot long rocket. And they had actual launching capabilities in the range to actually launch from Pakistan and hit us in Parnell. So like we couldn't even effectively shoot back if we wanted to. And they would just pound us. It was accurate. Mm-hmm. And so after a year, right, we built the very first combat outpost in Afghanistan. It's a place called Combat Outpost Margah. And this was right as our strategy shifted in Afghanistan as well, from like a strictly kinetic counter-terror strategy to counterinsurgency. And what came part and parcel with the counterinsurgency or the COIN strategy was building these little outposts all along the border, with the intent being of like, hey, in order for us to pacify this country or help grow and extend the reach of the government, we've got to live with these people. So we set up all these little bases. I didn't like that strategy in Afghanistan for a litany of reasons, but we built the very first one. And, you know, it was in such a dangerous place, man. Like we had all these combat engineers come out and help us fill these HESCO walls, which are basically like basically massive sandbags, right? That are, and like they had these big like front end loaders that would fill up. I mean, everything. I mean, they got out to this place where we were building this base that it was so dangerous and so bad that we had set up our perimeter at the middle of the night and the base was half done. And the engineers just left. They just left in the middle of the night. They just totally did him out of there, man. It was like, we woke up, we're like, where the hell did the engineers go? Like, what are we going to do with this base? Like, we're stuck out here, 5 gun trucks, 24 people on the ground, going home in 2 weeks, right? Nobody wants to die, by the way. Nobody wants to be like the last soldier killed, like on a week before you come home, right? And we're in the worst place in our area of operations in a half-built base. And no joke, man. Like we go to bed that night and like, again, like we had positioned our gun trucks at the 4 corners of the base. We were doing the best we could to protect it. And we get a call at like 3 a.m. that night. I get a call on the radio saying like, hey, you know, Black Hawk 6, like you got, or Black Hawk 3-6, you've got like 350 people coming to attack your position right now. And I'm like, I'm thinking like, what? Like, are you joking? No, like we had Predator in the area. They had seen like 250 enemy troops marching from Pakistan. And I've got the video of the Pred like up on my screen. And I see that this group of people like walking in this tactical column formation on either side of the road. And the Predator video is like following this line all the way back to Pakistan. It's just, you see these little, like it was like in white hot. So like these little white like dots moving them and they just never ended. It was just people forever. I'm like, holy hell. And then there was another group of like 50 or 60 coming in from the Northwest in a massive pincer movement to hit our platoon right at that moment, 2 weeks before we came home. And we're like, oh my God, like, isn't this some shit? Isn't this how it always goes, you know? And thankfully, our battalion staff, our battalion commander, Captain Dye, Colonel Toner, all those guys were just right on it. And because we had Predator in the area and an S2, like our battalion intelligence officer was doing the job right. We had air power stacked up and ready and waiting. And like, you know, the last thing that these guys said is like, because we're listening to their comms, of course, the enemy, we're listening to the enemy's comms. And they're like, yeah, like attack the base, cut off their heads, leave no one alive. And then like we brought in a B-1 strategic Lancer that dropped like 4 or 5 JDAMs right on top of the tactical column and killed everybody there. And then we had like as the B-1 peeled off, we had A-10s come in. And as the A-10s peeled off, we had Apaches come in. And like all throughout the night, like we're seeing these Apache helicopters, like they do what's called bumping. They like fly straight up in the sky and they peak, they loiter, and they just boom, like the gun run the whole way down. And my men and I are just like watching this, like it's like some sort of like monstrous fireworks display. And then, so anyway, we get to the next day arrives, like we'd stopped the attack. And we do what's called like an SSE, a sensitive site exploitation. And we go on to this, we go out to the objective area, and it's just one of the most gnarly things you've ever seen. Like, pieces of human beings everywhere, up in trees. It was just, that's what you want. I mean, as grisly as it sounds to people who are probably watching your show, like as an infantryman, when you hit the objective, the only thing you want to be doing is kicking boots, right? Like you don't want to have to be in a direct fire engagement with the enemy. But we get there and we're pulling pack mill Frontier Corps ID cards off these people. And we're seeing that these guys had like Merrill combat boots, body armor, Every one of their weapons, like whether it was AK-47s or PKMs, like were like still had the packing grease on them with Iranian serial numbers on them. These guys were like super well equipped, had body armor, helmets, better boots than we did, and they had Pac Mill ID cards on them. They packed like a Pac Mill facilitated attack on American troops, and 3 weeks later we were extended. That was the last one on our base. We were supposed to go home, and I had guys like all the way home that had been with their families for a few weeks at that point. We get that order that you said that we're extended. And the reason why that was profound is like, you barely make it home alive, right? You convince yourself the whole time, just, 300 days in a wake up, 200 days in a wake up, 100 days in a wake up. And then you finally get it. You turn in your ammunition, you turn in your armor piercing sappy plates, and you just say to yourself, like, holy cow, I made it. Like, I'm going to get to see my family. And then the Army says, nope, you're going right back into it. And by the way, 2 months from now is another spring offensive, and you're going to have to be the tip of the spear on that one as well and somehow make it out of that alive. Jack, that was the greatest leadership challenge that I'd ever experienced in my life, because I was the last one on the base. Like myself and my platoon sergeant were the only two people from our unit that were still on the base. Like, we had not left at all. And when our men came back, man, they were just crushed. Their morale, their souls were crushed. And that last 4 months, man, was absolutely brutal. And of course, the orders don't just say 120 days. The orders say 120 days or until mission complete. So every private, like the barracks lawyers are like, we're never going home. We're going to be here forever. I'm like, no, we're going home. I promise. Like, just stay focused. But it was brutal, man. It was
brutal.
That was by far the worst moment of that deployment.
Yep.
By far. And I look back on it and I can't even believe even today that it was freaking real,
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like a movie, but this stuff happened. I mean, it happened to you. It happened to a few other units out there. And I mean, it's incredible. But what is so cool about that is what happens next when they're like, load up the trucks. We're going out. Combat operations. We're not going to sit around here moping about, we're getting back after it right now. And it's so cool that I love this darkness fell, bullet scarred Humvees awaited us. So you're loading up, you've got ammo, you're ready to rock, getting out there again. And you say, not a man refused his duty. Despite everything, we had not lost the one thing that mattered most, faith in one another.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Brown stood in the turret, shoulders sagging. As I opened the door, I asked him, how you doing, brother? He looked down at me with a young man's eyes, 1,000 years old. We got this, sir. No worries. That's so awesome.
Yeah, man. I remember
what a testament to your platoon and your leadership and the American, fighting soldier right there. That says it all.
It does, man. I remember that like it was yesterday. I hadn't thought about that moment until this podcast, but it's interesting, to look. Because I can do this, right? Like I remember my men prior to the deployment, and I remember what their eyes looked like before, and I remember what their eyes looked like after.
Yeah.
And when you go through something like that, and it sounds weird, but I know that you'll get it. But like, I can almost tell a combat veteran just by looking in their eyes, because you can see what they lost. Like there's like that little sparkle, that little twinkle in an American, in a person's life who's never experienced death like that on a day-to-day basis. Like they have that still. Combat veterans don't, And I remember looking at Chris's eyes in that moment, like this was a kid, right? He was in his 20s. He was like just a kid, and he might as well have been 70 years old, and with a lifetime of experience. And so you always hear this, like, and when I talk to veterans today, is like, you always hear like there's that like cliche phrase that what is it? Youth is wasted
on the young.
On the young, right? Because like, they lack wisdom, and right. but combat veterans, people who have been to war, have a lifetime's worth of wisdom, and they have their youth to seize upon it with, right? And so, like, don't forget that. Like, and that's, war is hell. It's horrible. It stays with you every day. It changes you. There's no question about it. But just like experiences in life, like they change us, right? So war is bad. It changes us in a lot of ways. But every experience in life changes us, right? Like if you think about yourself in high school, how you were as a freshman, sometimes you think back when you're a senior and think like, oh, God, man, what the hell was I thinking? Why the hell did I wear that? Or I can't believe I did my hair like
I had that mullet.
Yeah, the point is that which the mullet is coming back, by the way.
That's what I hear.
Yeah, so like
trying to help bring it back.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, the experience of high school changes you. The experience of combat changes you. It doesn't mean that it breaks you. And so, I just that moment that it spoke volumes of the men in my platoon, and they were the reason why we fought so hard. We didn't want to let each other down.
Incredible. And I'm not going to read the epilogue in here on purpose because I wouldn't be able to make it through without shedding a couple tears. So if somebody reads that and is dry-eyed at the end of reading that epilogue, like I don't think we can be friends. Like it's so powerful. But when we talk about coming home, I want to jump back to like you didn't make it through this deployment unscathed. I mean, you got blown up and you endured something that most people would have gotten sent home for, would have gotten medically retired for almost immediately after they found out what was going on. Like you get blown up and for the rest of that deployment, you have fluid like leaking out of your ears.
Yeah.
Like people don't understand, like traumatic brain injury. I mean, you're dealing with headaches, you're dealing with blurry vision, your things leaking out of your ears, this blood, mucus, pus stuff coming out of your ears. And you didn't want to go home. You stayed with your men, you stayed in the fight, you adapted. But that experience of getting blown up, I mean, once again, one of those other of the 150, 200, 300 times you should have died, you don't, but it rings your bell pretty good.
Yeah.
So what happened in that experience?
Well, I get criticized a lot for this, looking like in retrospect that like, hey man, like you were hurt, like, and because you were hurt, like your leadership was compromised. You should have did a battle handover with another leader who was more, and all that's like, all that's true. Like it's valid. It's a valid point. But my counter to that is that in the moment, like, yes, I was blown up by a rocket propelled grenade and then an airburst mortar. And I think I had hairline skull fractures, which caused a cerebral spinal fluid leak. But like, I had men that got shot in the head, like that in that scene where you talked about the guy getting shot, falls down the mountain, and is right outside of my truck. Like just before he had fallen, he had shot one of my soldiers, a gunner in the truck in front of me in the head, a guy named John St. Jean, a guy from Haiti. And I watched it happen. I watched them exchange fire. I watched St. Jean get hit in the head, and we were administering first aid, and the bullet had penetrated his helmet, but the helmet slowed the velocity of the round down enough that it didn't penetrate his skull, just the skin, and skirted around the outside of the skull and out the other side.
Yep.
He was back on patrol 2 days after that. And so for me, it's like, that's what I was surrounded with every day. Another guy, Kantan Nguyen, gets shot in the head in Musa Kela, has a blood clot on his brain in Germany. The doc's like, you're going home. He's like, nope, I don't want to go home. Put me on blood thinners, get this fixed and send me back. Sergeant Garvin gets shot in the arm and doesn't just it's not just a clean shot. Like the AK-47 round was tumbling. So when it hit his arm, it like almost blew the lower portion of his arm off, barely kept it on it, barely were able to administer first aid and keep his arm intact. And we were able to save it. But he went home for basically 8 months. And then after we got extended, he came back. So like, that was what, in the moment, that was what I was surrounded by. How can I possibly go home and let myself be evac when my men are giving far more than me, So, it was tough for me, man. Like in the moment at the time, like this was back at a time where traumatic brain injury or TBI wasn't even an acronym in the Army. Like it wasn't even, it was really like when you get your bell rung playing football or ice hockey or something as a kid, like, and you're like, hey, here, take some Advil, drink some water, but go to sleep right away. That was the advice that I had. So I just sort of like, it was tough. Like I remember having like blurred vision and seriously bad headaches for a while. And I think for about a month I had that fluid leaking out of my nose and my ears. And over time, the fluid stopped. I just assumed things got better. But even after I got home, the condition just got worse and worse. But eventually I ended up being medically retired because of it. But yeah, man, that was, it was brutal, but nothing, it was, what I experienced was nothing more than what my men had experienced, and, when 85% of us, almost 100% of almost everybody in my platoon was wounded, even the new guys. And some of my guys came out of there with 2 or 3 Purple Hearts. It's crazy.
Amazing. I mean, you got a Purple Heart. All your guys are playing hurt. You're playing hurt right next to them. I mean, you're leaking fluid out. Did you realize how bad it was at the time? Like after you get your bell rung, 1, and then 2, when things start leaking out of your nose and your ears, do you realize how bad it is? Or are you just kind of like, I'm got to walk this off. It's healing up or whatever.
My first thought was, because I get blown up, and this was in June 10th, 2006. That was when my platoon we just got slammed. We were attacked by a force that outnumbered us by at least 10-1. And I had 24 guys on the ground, and they just hammered us for hours and hours and hours. And I got blown up in the first minute in the engagement. And by the way, every key leader in my platoon was down and out in the first minute of my engagement. So they obviously were watching us and watching how we interacted and identified key leaders in their reconnaissance. But I remember sitting up and getting pulled up by one of my troops and sitting with my legs splayed out in front of me like a 2-year-old kid on Christmas morning or something, just sitting out. And I remember I feel this fluid leaking down from my brain or from my nose. Who ultimately it was from my brain, but it was from my nose. And I'm thinking I had a bloody nose or something. And I just remember going like this and looking at it. It was just this clear fluid. And my first thought was, okay, this isn't blood. So I'm good. And this was I'm telling you, I was laying on the ground like this when I came to one of my soldiers slapping my face, and he was laughing. And I'm like, why is this dude laughing? And he's like, you got blown up, sir. And I'm like, what? And I open up and I look to my left and I'm looking at my hand laying on the ground just like this. And I just remember watching my hand, and it's shaking a little bit. But around my hand, I'm watching bullets land in between my fingers. The rate of fire, Jack, that was being rained down upon us was so heavy that I was laying there, felt like, oh my God, dude, I can't move not even 1 inch or I'm going to get in. And we were up on top of this hill. So there was no place to really take cover. Although at night when we emplaced, it looked like there was places to take cover, like behind rocks, trees, whatever. But the enemy had these 2 support by fire positions directly to the east of us that were taller than our position. So what the enemy was doing is, because they were on an elevated position, they had 3 machine guns on each of these hilltops. They had us in a crossfire, right? Because these hilltops are firing down on top of us, but they were hitting us with plunging fire from elevated positions. So even in some of the death blades that we had on top of that hill, it didn't matter because the round was coming in and landing on top of us. So there's nowhere we could go. Crazy. And they were hitting us with airburst mortars. So we had these big trees up there that were about this big around that were just getting they were just being blown apart.
Oh my gosh.
And so I'm on my back watching this and watching these trees just boom, just explode. And I'm thinking, Jesus, how the hell do we get out of this? And I look to my left and I see my platoon sergeant, who was the real guy that was he 40 plus years old, was with the 7th ID in Panama, had been in station in every hellhole all around the world. The toughest guy I've ever met. His name's Greg Greason. And now he has a beard down to here, and he's which makes a lot of sense. But I'm looking at him. He's pointing to his back, and his back is covered in this blood, and he's just screaming, "I'm hit! I'm hit!" And I'm thinking, holy cow, man! The guy that's advises me on everything. First thing I see is him getting hit, and I sit up and I'm sitting there, and I looked at him and I go, "Hey, Sergeant Greason, what the hell do we do here? What's our play?" And he looked at me this with this quizzical look on his face. He said, "Sir, we're getting attacked, shoot back." And I thought it was funny, but I also thought man, shit is hitting the fan if the platoon leader is shooting back, right? Yeah. Because my radio is my greatest weapon. And if I'm actually on the line shooting, then we are in trouble. And we were, man. And the force that attacked us that day was very, very sophisticated, Jack, because we got attacked. And as I mentioned, everybody, all the key leaders in my platoon were wounded in the first minute. But what they had done is hit us with airburst mortars first, right? To keep all of our heads down. Like that happens. Everyone takes cover while they simultaneously emplaced 2 separate support by fire positions. They then had us in a crossfire. They were hitting us with plunging fire, and they just beat the hell out of us like that for a long time while we were taking cover, trying to figure out what was going on. And after about, 20 minutes of that, they attacked us with 2 different assault elements from either hill. So they had used indirect fire to keep our heads down, simultaneously in place support by fires. And then after they had fire superiority, they attacked. That's exactly how we fight, man. And that firefight ended up going on for, 6-7 hours. And it took, we dropped at least 20 2,000-pound JDAMs to get them to break contact from a B1 strategic Lancer, and then from an A10 after that. 20. And dude, even then, we went back to the base, and even everyone was wounded. We lined up, bandaged up our stuff, and even then we got in another platoon's trucks and then went back out after the enemy and dropped even more bombs on them. It was just. I look back on that time in my life, and I'm telling you, it feels like it was a freaking dream. Yeah. And somehow I made it through that. You're right, man. I should have died. That's part of the reason why I wanted to make it a career, and ended up it was taken out of my hands anyway. I was medically retired, but when I got back, and it was I got back, and this was before I realized that they were going to medically retire me. I'm like, bro, my 9 lives are up. I can't be deploying anymore. I get whacked over there if I go back another time. But yeah, man, that deployment was just crazy. And in America, and ultimately the reason why I wrote that book was that Americans, by and large, in 2006, didn't even realize that a war was going on in Afghanistan. And that's ultimately why I wrote Outlaw Platoon.
No, exactly. It's there's so few touch points now. Like in World War II, everybody had some sort of a touch point. If they didn't know someone personally, well, what they were doing, they were saving, metal. They were saving rubber from their tires. They were they were putting up blackout curtains on their windows on the East and West coasts. They were somehow they were impacted by the war and the war effort, and they had a part in it. They were investing, even if it was a small investment. Some people made the biggest investment you can make and the ultimate sacrifice you can make, obviously, by losing family members. But others, hey, here's some tires from my car. Here, I'm supporting the war effort in that way. Yes. Whatever it was, people, I'm going to buy a war bond. Whatever it was, everyone had some sort of a touch point. And today, I forget what the percentage is, but it is very low.
It's 0.4% or something, man. And you're thinking about it, it's 0.4%. Of people in this country are carrying a very heavy burden for the rest. And these are people that are deploying and redeploying all during the longest period of war in our nation's history. It's just and you're right. Back during World War II, you'd be hard pressed to walk into an American neighborhood and find somebody that was not directly affected by the war effort. Everybody seemed to have skin in the game. And very few people do now. And ultimately, that's why I wrote Outlaw Platoon, because I think when I came back from Afghanistan, I really was. It was very important to me to help people who were struggling, with combat trauma. I just felt like maybe as a guy who had experienced it himself, I might be uniquely positioned to help others. And that was sort of the next mission. But writing that book and working with John Bruning, who sort of taught me the ropes. I realized some pretty profound stuff. And that was, as I was writing, it was taking the war out of myself and I was putting it on the page. And that was very cathartic for me. Yeah. You think about it like that, the war's not in me anymore. It's on this page. And then every time someone picks up the book and reads it, it's they understand about what my men and I went through. Mm-hmm. And now because they understand more about it, they're helping me carry and my men carry this burden. Right. Yeah. And so there's something that happens in that process that can't be helped in any VA hospital, that no amount of med can help. It's a cultural shift. Mm-hmm. It's a cultural understanding of what war was like that I think enables veterans to more easily carry that heavy and traumatic burden. And so that sort of, that was one of the big things that I learned after writing Outlaw Platoon, is that soldiers need to do everything they can to tell their story and not be shy about it. And, because our everywhere we go, man, like veterans are always very humble because it really is never about us. It's always about the people who didn't make it home. And God, that is so true. But the flip side of that is that if you don't tell your story, then people don't know. And if people don't know, they have no idea what the cost of freedom is.
Yep.
And so, just like Tom Brady wears his 5, 6, what I don't even know what it is now, 6 Super Bowl rings now, like 7 Super Bowl rings now. He wears them and he wears them proudly, and he should. Those are amazing accomplishments. That's why I tell veterans, like, hey man, like I get why veteran community, why we are the way that we are, but it's important for you to wear those medals. Those medals separate you from everybody else. And hopefully they're a conversation starter, right? Like hopefully people are like, hey, thank you for your service. Where did you serve? What was that like? And through those conversations, 1,000 times over in every state in America, maybe we can bridge the gap between people who enjoy freedom on a day-to-day basis and people who protect it. And if we bridge that gap, if we bring those two demographics closer, the hope is, Jack, that our country, it's good for our country, right? Because now people understand what it means to live in a free country and not take the freedom that we have here for granted. And veterans will feel like they're not exiles in their own country when they come home.
Oh, exactly. That's why I think it's so important that everybody read this book, particularly people that didn't have that touch point, with such a small number of people having that direct touch point with those who have gone down range. This is, best is such a, like what we talked about earlier, such a strange word to say, but this book should be read by every American, in particular those who didn't go down range, to understand what guys like you sacrificed there of your youth in many cases. Like a lot of you guys became older men down there, wiser men down there on the front lines, experiencing what you did, sacrificing what you did. So this book is such an incredible way to get that word out there, to connect with people that didn't experience that. And when we talk about Afghanistan, oh, by the way, I saw a guy shot in the head, same thing in that with that helmet, same exact thing, hit, slowed it down enough. And it was an Army guy in Najaf, goes in, goes around, exact same thing. And I've heard from so many people, helmets doing that and going in, slowing it down enough that it just breaks the skin, hits the skull and just goes around the outside. Like I've heard that from so many people over the years. So whoever was making those helmets, well
yes, done. God bless you. If you're watching this podcast, thank you. But like that's why it's certainly, because you see these like military movies like from Vietnam where people like take their helmets off or whatever, they leave the strap undone. I'm like as a leader, keep it on, man. Like that, it will save your life.
Seriously, so
on
crazy.
A number of occasions.
Yeah, no, exactly. And there's one line from the book that kind of bridges. I want to know how it informs what you're hopefully going to be doing going forward in the Senate here. But this line comes earlier on in the book, and you say, "We'd gone through our year in country, judging these Afghans through the prism of our own value system, never fully grasping what we were up against." Mm-hmm. And for me, that line really stuck out because as a combat leader, one of the primary responsibilities is understanding the nature of the conflict in which you're engaged. Yes. It is also the responsibility of those senior level military and political leaders who are committing forces to the fight. And in this case, I feel like we had so much, not just ancient history, of which, of course, we have Genghis Khan, we have a bunch of other stuff when we're particularly talking about Afghanistan, but we have some more recent stuff too. 3 British experiences in there, the Soviet experience, and then our own. And we were very ill prepared. We sent you guys into that fight. The stuff that I did, it's going on in every major city in the U.S. tonight. People serving warrants. They've been doing it since the late 60s in SWAT teams. I mean, you're gathering intelligence, you're going out, you're kicking in a door, you're grabbing somebody, you're exploiting them for intelligence, that sort of a thing. But for you, you're out there every day in daylight. And I always thought that was important too. Like when I was working with the Army or something like that, it was important for me not just to be a liaison with those guys, but to get in the strikers, like in Mosul, and go out there. And I would do the unless otherwise directed email to my senior level leaders, like, "Hey, I'm going out on this patrol," thinking that they would say no. But the unless otherwise directed, I'll be going out, at whatever time, 4:00 this afternoon, and then I'd send it, and I wouldn't check email again, because in those days especially, you had glitches with comms, and I didn't see it. didn't come through. But getting out there with those guys was so important, to just get in the stack with them, go through these cordon and clearing operations, that sort of a thing in the daylight, dealing with what they were dealing with on a regular day, and not just be that guy who's letting them know what special operations wants to do that evening or whatever. So you can coordinate. So I always thought that was important. But when you wrote this here, that sentence, as leaders and what you'll hopefully be doing in the Senate here going forward, when you look back through this lens, through your experience, how do you reflect on Afghanistan and us leaving Afghanistan at this point? I mean, it's been 20 years. And then there's one side of it's the academic logic, history, wisdom. And then the other side's the personal side. Like, how do you talk to a family who lost someone over there, or to the guy who came back with, missing 2 legs and an arm? And for me, it's very difficult for me to think that part through. But I have a way that I conceptualize it, and passing on lessons to future generations and turning this experience into wisdom going forward. But how do you look at this last 20 years with your experience, and us leaving? Like, how do you think about that in your head when you think about it, whether publicly, privately? How do you I don't know, not rationalize, but how do you think back on those 20 years and then what we're doing now?
Yeah, well, I'd be lying to you if I told you that I wasn't thinking, like, what the hell was it all for? Right? I mean, that's there, but I also realized that we did a lot of amazing things for the Afghans there, and the men and women who served in that country have so many things to be proud of about that service. But like, I kind of got a taste of this experience a little bit when we were in Afghanistan, in that we were doing an operation in Musa Kala, and back then, like in Musa Kala and Helmand province, Afghanistan, the Taliban had just overrun large swaths of Helmand. It was just a hornet's nest down there. And we went down to Musa Kala. A small portion of my platoon went down to Musa Kala for a special mission down there. And I mean, they just took the fight to the enemy every day, and drove them out of Musa Kala and Helmand province, and secured everything, and paid a heavy blood price in the process. And then the Brits came in. We did a battle handover with the Brits, gave it to the Brits, and they just gave it all back. And we were just like, what the hell did we just bleed the ground red for over there, just to give it back? I sort of feel like that now in Afghanistan, just watching about how things are falling apart over there and how they're falling apart so quickly. But a couple of things on that. I recognize that most of the debate over leaving Afghanistan centers around the humanitarian component of what Afghanistan will be like after we're gone. In other words, what's going to happen to the interpreters who helped us, or the little girls who went to school, or the kids who wanted to work on American bases, or the adults who helped or brought Americans food or water while we were there, people who helped us. What's going to happen to those people? And the reality is they will be targets. As you mentioned, there would be different echelons of targets, but the Taliban will go after them. And that's a tragedy, because most of the people in that country stepped forward because of the American promise of, like, look, we're going to have your backs and we're going to help you fight for freedom. But at the same time, we've been there for 20 years. Like, I just turned 40 last month. Like, we've been at war in Afghanistan, in a place where I was wounded for over half of my life. Half of my life we've been at war there, man. So crazy. Like, we can't stay there forever, right? And to your point about the responsibility of leadership here in this country, and I mean Democrats or Republicans, and both of those parties do a fine job at mucking things up, we also have an obligation to American kids who go to that war and deserve to have clarity on what the mission is and what end state operations look like, And I think if you went to Afghanistan today, or maybe a few months ago, and go to different bases and asked a different American private what the mission was, you'd probably get a different answer from all of them. And that is a huge, huge problem. Yeah. Because if the mission is not clear, it creates hesitation. If there's hesitation on the battlefield, people die. And so, I think that it's time to go, right? And as recognizing very clearly that there is a humanitarian component, but that ultimately I think we have an obligation to American sons and daughters who raise their right hand in the hopes to serve this country. And they volunteer to serve this country, knowing that they probably will go to war, knowing that they might have to give their life. But by God, if we're sending them, we sure as hell better have a clear-cut mission. We sure as hell better know what the hell it looks like to be mission complete, you know? And I think part of the problem is, Jack, is the promotions and the meritocracy, right, of the military of officership. You know, like I remember being in Afghanistan and being on what they call the BUBs, the battlefield update briefs, and
That's
like
right. I hadn't thought of that in a while.
Yeah. Well, every commander was like, this many killed, this many missions. Yes, things are under control. And I'm thinking, under control? Like, this is crazy over here. And like, but here's the thing. Like, I understand this isn't like a ding on my commanders. Like, I understand why they report things that way. But the problem is that if say I was a commander in Afghanistan and I was in Eastern Afghanistan, I'm like saying just like, hey, shit's hitting the fan out here. We can't do this. Like, we ain't going to be able to get this mission done, right? Well, guess what? I'm not getting promoted. I'm not getting the top block on my officer evaluation report, you know? So because of the meritocracy inherent in our promotion systems, everybody at every level, I think, promotes an overly rosy picture of the battlefield at that level of the chain of command, right? And then woven into that are officers, not all officers, but many that are only concerned, or maybe I'll just say leaders, right? Leaders that are only concerned with their bow and never their wake, right? Because they play that game, right?
Great line.
And so guys like, you know, after I got out, I told you in this interview, I'm like, my 9 lives are up. I'm pumped. Like, so guys that have experienced the most amount of war get out. They don't like to play the game. They're not willing to say, hey, everything's peachy here, like everything's going great. So those guys get out, and what's left are those people that are only concerned about their bow, never their wake. And that's why we end up with generals who end up being like politicians. And it's a real problem. And I think that's why, Jack, at the end of every year, you can go back and look at like the overall situation report in Afghanistan that comes out in January of every year. It's always like, we're on track. Things are going great. You know, we're on track for a couple of years. We'll be peasy clean.
Yeah.
But like, we're never, you know, that's not true.
Yeah.
And we get to that point where those reports are issued because no one's willing to say, wait a second, things are FUBAR and we need to adjust strategy. And we need to do it boldly.
Yeah.
You know?
Bold adjustments. Exactly right.
So moving forward, like leaders, you know, whether if you're running for political office in the House, for the Senate, or you're advising the president or a national security team, you better be aware of that dynamic, because seek and find people who are willing to give you honest assessments at tactical levels on the battlefield, right? Mm-hmm. And typically it's the door kickers, the people who have seen the most amount of combat, that will give you that unvarnished view. But they have to be sought out unless the meritocracy in our promotion system is reformed.
Oh yeah, that's a big one. We're promoting people off a system that was like developed over 100 years ago. You know, like there's other ways to evaluate people today that you couldn't have done, or would have been extremely hard to do, let's say in like 1890 or 1910. But we can do these things today a little better. We can adapt. But yeah, like my novels are fiction, but once again, very therapeutic to write. And then these senior level leaders, they give me no shortage of material when I'm coming up with politicians in uniform or politicians to make bad guys. Like they make that part easy on me. And it is very therapeutic now as a citizen to write about them and vent through the medium of popular fiction. But so what you're doing now, you came back, is it the American Warrior Initiative that you start when you get back? You're doing all these things for veterans. It's absolutely incredible. I encourage everybody to go check out what you're doing, American Warrior Initiative. But you run for a seat, Pennsylvania, in one of the most contentious election cycles in recent memory. That's probably that's a safe way to say that. You can't really argue with that. And you're running Pennsylvania 17th Congressional District. I was so excited to see you get in that race. I wanted to support you as much as I possibly could. We need good guys in there, good people in Congress to lead this next generation. And I was shocked that you didn't get it. Like I was following along fairly closely, you know, since we have a personal connection. So of all the races going on, you know, I'm watching this and, you know, I was like, oh, he's got this. It was so close. I mean, so close, so contentious, especially when you plug it into everything else that was going on in the country at that time. But can you talk about that race for people people like me who don't understand what it's like to throw your hat in the ring like that, and then how you go about running and getting support and getting your name on a ballot and then running against somebody and like, and then especially during this time, which was, I think, probably a little different than it would have been had you done this 10 years ago.
Yeah, man. Oh my gosh. I'd always been involved in the fight ever since I came back, whether it was like, you know, volunteering on campaigns at the local, state, and federal level, helping candidates knock doors. Like I just always felt it was important to be involved in that process and advising members of the House and the Senate. I've done that since I come back, like on national security issues, veterans issues, foreign policy. I was even I was the chairman of then Republican Governor Corbett's Veterans Coalition. So I'd always been involved, but I never really wanted to run myself. And then,
so you're gathering information. You're getting a peek behind the curtain a little bit. You're developing this knowledge base. So that's okay.
And then President Trump comes to Western Pennsylvania and like name drops me in a speech. And
I remember that
about to run, and I wasn't even there, or never met him, never talked to him. I was in South Carolina with the American Warrior Initiative, giving away a service dog, and my phone is like blowing up. I've got like I come off somebody just talking like on stage. We just presented this dog, and my phone is ringing in my pocket like over and over and over again. I'm like, what the hell is going on? And I like sneak off stage, and like I see I got like 56 missed calls, and it's calls from like reporters and political consultants and all these people. Like, what the hell is going on? And my mom is calling me over and over and over again. And I'm like, oh my God, like she doesn't call me unless there's something wrong. Right. And so I think to my mom, what's going on? And she goes, Sean, are you running for Congress? And I said, Mom, no, I'm not running for Congress. And she goes, well, President Trump says you're running for Congress. And I'm like, what? Because I guess the dude, he goes off script quite a bit, you know? And she sends me the video of President Trump, and it's President Trump saying like, you know, Sean Parnell is a brilliant military man. He's got everything going. I'm like, what the hell? And so I guess, I went from this, like, I just turned my life upside down to get in the race. And like, you know, I respect the office of the president, you know, and if it's like, if Barack Obama said, hey, Sean, we're going to send you back to Afghanistan to be the ambassador of Afghanistan, first thing I would have done would be like throw up in my mouth a little bit because I would want to do it. But I would do it because I respect that office and what it represents so much. So I turned my life upside down, got in the race, and with no real official political experience, started doing everything I could to learn about this process. And it was like drinking from a fire hose every day. But I was really proud of the campaign that we ran, man. I mean, we were a grassroots campaign. We ended up having tens of thousands of like volunteers, people who were willing to like make phone calls for us or knock on doors for us or help us work events. And we ended up having 45,000 individual donors, which is a big deal, by the way. Like I liken campaign dollars to bullets in a gun. Like if you run out of ammo in combat surrounded by the enemy, you're dead. Same is true in politics, right? Like you run out of money on a campaign, then the enemy, like, or your opponent can bludgeon you to death with ads on TV or on the radio or whatever, and you don't have the ability to respond, you're dead. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people, even pundits who've been reporting on politics their whole life would be like, oh, so how's it going? The Republican Party give you a lot of money? And I started laughing. The Republican Party, they helped me in a lot of ways, and many, many ways with policy and stuff like that, and roll call, vote sheets, whatever. But the Republican Party doesn't like cut you a check and say, here you go, run your campaign. No, you've got to earn it. And basically, like people think that like, you know, being on stage with Trump and doing the sexy stuff is like what running for political office is, when in reality, it's like me in a dark room, like on a phone, cold calling people begging for money. Wow. And like 99% of the time, it's like, no, screw you, hang up. But it's like that one time out of 10, people are like, okay, tell me about your campaign. And you're like, wow. Thank you, you know? Wow. And so that's why I say like, this is part of the problem with our politics, Jack, because we get so many people, by the way, on both sides of the aisle that are like rich, super rich, out of touch, because they don't have to like earn it. They go in, they self-fund, they spend their own money. And, maybe saying that they're buying a seat is a little bit extreme, but they don't have to do the cold calls or the fundraising, So, but when you have 45,000 individual donors, that's powerful, right? When you can fill up a baseball stadium with the amount of donors that you have, now that's how the system was intended to work, right? Where I'm beholden to the people. I'm not beholden to a corporation or a special interest or, donors from, New York City or California. I'm beholden to the small dollar donors who helped me accomplish the mission. So 45,000 individual donors was something I'm real proud of. And we just ran an old school style campaign, man, just sort of like you would run like a military unit. We had like our volunteers were called Parnell's platoon.
Yeah.
Those military guys were like, it's kind of cheesy, but it's cool. Like people
you can click on that on that website on Parnell for Senate. It's right there. You can click on it, sign up for a newsletter and make a donation and all that sort of thing. And then now it's Senate. I mean, so you ran for that seat, crazy. I mean, I love the ads, by the way. I mean, your ads are awesome, or the ones that are out there, where you walking through the factory. And then the new one out there right now, it was John Burns, right?
John Burns, yeah.
I mean, amazing. Start off with his story, Pennsylvania ties in there. But my first thought when, on the House seat last year, I was like, come on, Pennsylvania. I was like, come on. We were just, it was so close. I mean, it was such a close race, right? I mean, right down to the wire, and then all sorts of contention afterward. But I mean, you were so close. It was crazy. But you probably learned a ton. I'm sure you learned a ton.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Look, I mean, I learned, on election night, there's so much happened after the fact. And it's confused. It bothers me a little bit. The media tries to shut down any conversation about this, because it doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or Democrat. We should both be able to come together to try to make our elections better every time. Like, even in the 21st century in America, even one person's vote getting canceled out by an illegal vote or a vote that wasn't cast properly is too much. Like, we have all the technology in the world to make sure that does not happen. If it happens once, that means one person out there's vote doesn't count.
Yep.
And in the United States of America, that shouldn't happen. And the only way that we prevent things like that from happening are good faith conversations on both sides. Like, the Dominion voting machines, I'm sure people talk about that crap all the time. And I'm just saying that Democrats had issues with those machines in 2018. Republicans had issues with those machines in 2020. Maybe that's something that, instead of pointing a finger at one another, maybe we could come together and say, maybe we can do something to like give people like a warm and fuzzy about these voting machines. Like, maybe Democrats and Republicans can come together, develop reforms that make our elections better, like, instead of just yelling, screaming, and blaming, right? And so I did learn a lot, though. I learned a lot about the system. I learned a lot about the process, and basically I've got all those donors and all those volunteers that are still motivated. And we just turned around and pivoted to the Senate, because there's an open seat here in Pennsylvania. Senator Toomey, who's a Republican, he's retiring. There hadn't been an open seat in Pennsylvania for a very, very long time. And so we just turned right around and didn't quit and just got right back in the fight. And we feel real good about it, man. And when I tell people, it's like, yeah, I'm running with an R after my name. Ultimately, I'm a constitutional conservative. I did not take an oath to protect and defend any political party, Republican or Democrat. I took an oath to defend the people of the state. And by the way, that means Republicans, Democrats, independents, and others. It means representing everybody. And if that means pissing people off in the Republican Party and the Democrat Party every now and again, so be it. I don't care about that. And so for me, it's not about finding the Republican solution to the problems that we face today, or the Democrat solutions. It's about finding the right ones. And it's about making sure that whatever legislation is put forth, or whatever solution that we advocate for, adheres to the Constitution first, last, and always. That's it.
That's it. And going forward, this next decade is going to be so important. It seems like, those on the side of the Constitution, on the side of freedom and liberty and opportunity, we've I don't want to say, I hate saying lost, but the culture of war, we didn't spend much time recognizing how important popular culture is to the country and to the world. And essentially from the let's say mid 50s, certainly picking up steam in the 60s onward, we essentially conceded education, big tech now, Hollywood, publishing, sports now, like almost every facet of society, except for maybe small business and the political realm, where, if half and half-ish. But everything else, like we didn't spend much time on. So it's so important to get guys like you in there and that understand the history of this country, understand what people sacrificed from the inception of this country up until today. So we have these freedoms and opportunities that we do and are going to make decisions that are going to account for making sure that future generations, our kids and grandkids, have those same freedoms and options and opportunities.
That's exactly right, man. That is the mission, right? And for the first time in my life, it's not a foregone conclusion that our kids will inherit an America that's rich with opportunity. It's just not. And you heard Reagan talk about the freedom has to be fought for. It's not passed down in the bloodstream. He's exactly right. And at this phase in my life, that's where I'm at. Like, this is our generation's time. Look, we fought on the battlefield. In many cases, bled on the battlefield, and a lot of our friends, brothers and sisters, did not come home. But that fight, it's like we can't get home, take a knee, and then lay down and quit. We have to stay in the fight. And I think our country expects us to stay in the fight. And politics is dirty, but it ain't nothing compared to what combat was like. And so, I can take whatever the left throws. And by the way, I come from a family of Allegheny County, Western Pennsylvania Union Democrats. So I don't approach these issues as a rabid partisan. I approach these issues of is this constitutional or not? And if yes, it's constitutional, then we can have a conversation, right? But I feel like our country right now, we face a lot of very great leadership challenges, right? I think our debt and deficit is going to be one of the greatest leadership challenges of our time. We're almost 30 trillion with a T dollars in debt. I mean, that is just a mind-boggling number that your children and my children and their children's children are going to have to pay. The bill is going to come due on that eventually. And oh, by the way, we're borrowing a lot of that money from China, who is the number one geopolitical foe. The greatest threat that I believe this nation has ever faced, economically, militarily, the greatest threat that we've ever faced, and we're borrowing money from them. I just.
It's so crazy that these things seem so obvious. That's why I get so frustrated. And I'm a little bit opposite from you in that I would rather go back to Afghanistan and Iraq than go into politics. Because down there I could do something kinetic.
Why you should, though. That's exactly why. That's what I'm not trying to push you. I'm not. But that's precisely the kind of people that we need, though. I am not going to be a career guy, right? My whole mission, by the way, is to go to Washington for a couple of terms, shrink the size and scope of the federal government, because I truly believe that there's a direct correlation between a small federal government and more freedom in our lives. And then I'm going to buy a farm in Western Pennsylvania and probably never talk to anybody again.
That's fantastic. Well, it's great. I feel like we're walking into an L ambush, and the L ambush is big tech here and big government here. And I don't say Republican or Democrat for a reason right there, but it's big government on this side, it's big tech on this side, and it's us walking in the middle with our Constitution right into that ambush. And it's so obvious that we're walking that direction. It's like we can see them. And we can see they have this ground up here that's tactically advantageous because they can control, in many cases, our behaviors even. And that's the scary part, influencing behaviors through all the information that's been gathered over the last 20 years that we've been putting in passwords into these computers. But we're walking into this thing and we see it and we're not taking, well, I guess we're taking some steps here and there, but we're not making bold adjustments. And we're walking right into this ambush and we're about to get friggin' slaughtered.
You're exactly right. So you're talking big tech, big media, big business colluding, all three of them colluding with big government to force things upon the American people. Mm-hmm. That is not good. That's not good. It's one of the greatest threats that we face today. And for years, it used to be the Democrat Party and the mainstream media, 10 years ago, it was the Democrat Party in Washington would collude with the mainstream media, and the mainstream media would elevate their talking points. But then conservatives would respond with our conservative media, talk radio, Rush Limbaugh, Fox News, Breitbart, whatever, and we'd respond, right? And the American people would watch that debate unfold and determine what path forward was the best for the country. The danger now is those two dynamics exist, right? Except for now there's big tech, which can flip a switch and censor one side of the debate.
Yep.
And that's the danger. And some big tech oligarch is determining what people can and cannot say on either side of the aisle. It's a real problem. And it's a real challenge. In fact, it's one that certainly Republicans are dealing with now, but it's also been, these are issues that have been raised by Elizabeth Warren on the campaign trail like a year ago.
Yep, I remember.
So, these are things that I think Republicans and Democrats should be able to come together on, but because things are so divided, it's so challenging and difficult to do. But it's also the reason why I think it's so important for veterans to run, because if you're a veteran, like whether you're a Democrat or Republican, at some point you've volunteered in your life to like put a great many things before your life, right? So like you're signing on that dotted line, you're putting service to your country before having a family or making a dollar or even before your own life. Mm-hmm. And I think that like when that happens, that again, Democrat or Republican, you get to Washington, you're more willing to set aside the sort of poisonous political dialogue and do what's best for the country and put the country first, right? Like when you look at the relationship that Ronald Reagan had with Tip O'Neill, they were able to work together and do things for this country that were phenomenal. And the same thing is true for Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich, right? Two opposite parties, but we live at a different time today, and I think that's precisely why people in this country are so desperate for more leaders and fewer politicians.
Yep. No, you're exactly right. There's a great photo of Ronald Reagan, Nancy Reagan out with Tip O'Neill, his wife, and they're at the Kennedy Center and they're in tuxedos and they just had dinner and can you imagine the leaders of both parties going out with their spouses and putting on the tuxes and sitting down for dinner and then going to a show together? Like I can't imagine that. But you go back to that photo and it's so poignant in that you're like, oh, this wasn't that long ago where we were getting, and we used to be able to, regardless of what you thought about Second Amendment issues or the First Amendment used to be something that we could all rally around because we could say, hey, I disagree with you, but I'm standing up and I'm fighting for your right to say it. That used to be the thing, like growing up 70s, 80s, 90s, yes. Like that was something that we all could agree on. And now we don't even agree on that. Now it's like that's become a contentious thing. Just it's so painful to see that unfolding, and then realizing that our children are going to probably be fighting this fight as well. Maybe with not all the tools that we had, all this respect for the Constitution and everyone who gave these rights to us by sacrificing themselves and their families. It's disheartening. So, but I want to ask, what gives you hope also? Because we're talking like when I think about these issues, I'm like, oh my God, my wife and I talk about it all the time. And you don't know what to do. You feel so. You feel helpless in many cases, and you're getting in the fight, you're getting in the ring, but so you must have hope in that you're getting in this ring. You believe that this is a country still worth fighting for, that these principles are still worth fighting for. So when you wake up in the morning and oh man, here we go, I'm getting after it again today in this new battle space. Like, what gives you hope to step into that ring? What are you thinking about?
You know what? I'm thinking about my kids and trying to make sure that as you were just talking about, that our kids inherit a country that's great and free and rich with opportunity, and one where they can express their opinions and without fear of being canceled, right? And so this country, there are so many people out there. And that's the greatest privilege of running for political office is there's so much, it's such a grind, and there's so much backstabbing, and there's so much politicking and fundraising is difficult, but the people are really what make this worthwhile. And I sort of, just as I mentioned how great troops inspire their leaders, like the people of this country inspire me. every day when we're out there on the campaign trail, we meet people that maybe they don't have a loud megaphone, but they feel the same way as you and I. And they'll say to you, like, please keep fighting. Please keep fighting for me and my family. Please keep fighting for my kids. Or thank you for advocating for my kids and standing up when no one else will. That is why, that's what gives me hope. That's what makes it worthwhile. There are still millions and millions and millions of Americans who feel just like we do. And the reality isn't like what's on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. It's out there in our communities, and people who love and appreciate this country and just want more leaders, you know? And so I'm just going to keep fighting like hell for all of them.
Man, I love hearing you say that. That fires me up. I'm going to pass that along to my wife. I'm going to be like, hey, Sean's fired up. He's out there doing it. So thank you for stepping in the ring. I've already kept you over an hour longer than I said I would. So thank you for taking that, the time to do this. And then you also have an Eric Steele novel. You have a series of fiction thrillers that are coming out. I think it's coming out September 7th. If memory serves. So the latest one is coming out, and it's a true red, white, and blue hero that you have as the protagonist of these novels. And that's coming out here shortly. And hopefully that's a gateway. If people are not nonfiction readers, it's a gateway to this right here. It's so important. So that's coming out soon.
Yeah, Left 4 Dead, man. I'm excited about this book. I think Left 4 Dead is the best story yet, you know, and I think people are really, really going to like it. Really, really good. It talks about the rising threat of China and what I think the next phase in their geopolitical operations is going to be, and how the heck America gets their arms around that. Nice. You know, and so I'm excited for it.
Nice. I love that we can explore some of these themes through the medium of popular fiction. I think it's a really great way. It's also it's therapeutic. It's cathartic. It is fiction, but you also get to explore a lot of different things that you might not necessarily take the time to explore otherwise. So so thank you for writing those. Everybody, get out there, get Outlaw Platoon, get the novels, and then everybody in Pennsylvania, get to ParnellForSenate.com. and join Parnell's platoon and help support this cause. And sign up for the email, donate. You just heard how $1 is like a round in your M4 mag. So anything and everything, I'm sure, is appreciated and helps move the bar forward. So definitely check that out. And dude, Sean, thank you so much for your support personally and professionally. Thanks for being such a great advocate for veterans and a great example for veterans out there. And then not just for doing that from the sidelines, but for getting right back on the field and going into what to me seems worse than Iraq and Afghanistan from the outside. So thank you for putting yourself at risk in the political arena and fighting for all of us who believe in these principles of freedom and opportunity.
Thanks, brother. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, man.
Absolutely. Take care, and we'll talk again soon.
All right. See you, Jack.
Better, brother. Welcome to the gear highlight portion of the Danger Close podcast. I want to talk about an artist, Elwood T. Risk. You can find him at elwoodtrisk.com. I first became aware of him years ago when he did a project with a friend of mine who shot a round every minute on the minute on the 11th anniversary of 9/11 for every SEAL killed in action. And then Elwood T. Risk made a piece of art called Until It Hurts, and you can go on his website and check that out. You might also have noticed some of his work in the background of Hollywood productions like Californication, 6 Feet Under, a host of others. This was the one that was behind me in my last office. Dun, dun, pretty sweet. And it is now in another room in the house. And then when I got out of the military, my wife and I got our first real piece of art, and it was an Elwood T. Risk piece called Blue Risk with Halo. And if you scroll down on my Instagram, you can see it there, but it's awesome. It's stunning, just as is everything that he does. I picked this up while I was in San Pedro last week. So thank you so much for this gift. I love it. It's going to go right here behind me as soon as I find a hammer and a nail. And I was in San Pedro doing a little filming for The Terminal List, starring Chris Pratt, coming to Amazon Prime on Redacted. But if you pay attention as you're watching the series when it drops, you just might notice Elwood T. Risk art in the background. I'm not going to say which piece it is, but keep your eyes peeled. So elwoodtrisk.com. Go check him out there. Follow him on Instagram, and incredible work. So thank you, my friend. Thank you for tuning into the Danger Close podcast, an Ironclad original presented by SIG Sauer. For more on Sean Parnell, go to parnellforsenate.com. Check out his videos there. Check out Parnell's Platoon, make a donation, support, find out a little more about him, and you can link to his social channels from there. Be sure and pick up Outlaw Platoon and his latest Eric Steele novel. You can find me on the social channels at Jack Carr USA, and you can go to jackcarrusa.com for the hats, for the mugs, for t-shirts, for all that sort of things, bookmarks, and everything else that's going on there. You can go to officialjackcarr.com and check out the reading lists, the blog, and get some information on behind the scenes of the Terminal List starring Chris Pratt. So thank you so much for tuning in. And until the next time, stay safe, stay strong, keep fighting.